On January 7, 1943, a maid at the New Yorker Hotel opened the door to room 3327. In the wide bed lay the motionless body of an 86-year-old man, cold to the touch. This was Nikola Tesla, the man who gave the world alternating current. Within just a few hours, it wasn't relatives or paramedics who entered his room. It was raided by agents of the Federal Bureau of Investigation and officials from the Office of Alien Property Custodian. They cleared dozens of boxes filled with papers, devices, and manuscripts belonging to the American citizen. They searched him as if he were a hostile saboteur, and his documents were classified for decades to come. What did this quiet Serbian man, who spent his days feeding pigeons on his windowsill, know that made the government rush to his room faster than his own nephew? Here are the 6 main mysteries of Nikola Tesla that scientists have been scratching their heads over for nearly a century, and the last one is more terrifying than all the others combined. Let's begin with the greatest dream in the history of electricity. Imagine the year 1901 on the quiet shore of Long Island, New York. Rising among the dunes and pines is a gigantic steel tower standing 187 feet tall. At its peak sits a massive dome resembling a 55-ton metallic mushroom. Beneath the tower's base, iron rods plunge nearly 40 meters deep into the earth. This structure is called Wardenclyffe, and it was built by a man possessed by a vision. Tesla wanted to distribute electricity to the entire world, just like a radio signal, straight through the earth and through the air. No wires, no poles, no electric meters. Any farmer in Texas or fisherman in Japan could simply stick a rod into the ground and access free electrical power. The insane project was funded by John Pierpont Morgan himself, one of the wealthiest bankers of the era. He granted the inventor $150,000, an astronomical fortune at the turn of the century. But when the banker realized Tesla intended to distribute electricity completely free of charge, he walked away. Morgan made his fortune on cable networks, copper wires, and utility bills. Free global electricity meant the utter collapse of his financial empire. You can't put a meter on that kind of energy, and you can't shut off the valve to make a profit. The banker refused further funding, and the tower never reached its full operational capacity. The laboratory was designed by the famous Stanford White, one of the most expensive architects in America at the time, and its power was meant to be supplied by a 200-kilowatt Westinghouse dynamo. Tesla planned to build a global network of 30 such towers across the planet. On a hot night in 1903, residents of nearby Shoreham witnessed something unbelievable. Giant blue lightning bolts shot from the tower's dome, visible as far away as the neighboring state of Connecticut. Newspapers described the spectacle as a page ripped from a Jules Verne novel. The following day, Tesla refused to comment to journalists about what happened. The tower never operated at full capacity again. For reasons still unknown, on July 4, 1917, dynamite was placed inside the tower and it was demolished. The metal was sold for scrap for a meager $1,750. Officially, authorities blamed the demolition on fears that German spies might use the tower as a landmark, but the war had already been raging for 3 years, and the tower had stood there harmlessly the entire time. Modern physicists still argue over the central question of this mystery. Could this tower actually have worked? 2 Russian brothers, the Plekhanovs, studied Tesla's blueprints and began raising money to build a replica. They claimed the principle is entirely sound and that Tesla was simply a century ahead of his time. Yet to this day, no one has achieved stable wireless energy transmission over thousands of kilometers. The question has hung in the air for over a century. Was the tower destroyed because it didn't work, or because it worked all too well? The second mystery hides even deeper beneath archival dust. On July 10, 1934, Tesla celebrated his 78th birthday in a luxury New York hotel. He gathered journalists and announced a new invention that left the reporters breathless. The inventor called the device Teleforce, but the newspapers labeled it the death ray the very next day. The New York Times ran a sensational front-page headline, and the news quickly spread around the world. Tesla claimed his machine could bring down 10,000 enemy aircraft at a distance of 250 miles from a nation's border. The scientist insisted it wasn't a ray at all, but a concentrated beam of charged particles. According to him, the apparatus accelerated microscopic metallic slugs at speeds hundreds times faster than artillery shells. Tesla stated that the machine could create an invisible wall of energy around any country's border. No army could cross this wall, and no bomber could reach a city. The inventor wrote personally to Morgan's son, explaining the schematics and offering them to Britain, France, and the League of Nations. Soon after, Soviet intelligence got involved. In 1935, the Soviet Amtorg Trading Corporation paid Tesla $25,000 for detailed blueprints. Where those blueprints ended up remains a mystery. The strangest part of this story isn't the concept itself, but how the military departments of various nations reacted. The U.S. Bureau of Standards publicly claimed that generating such energy was physically impossible. However, upon hearing rumors of Teleforce, the British began their own secret experiments, work that ultimately led to the creation of the first radar systems. A Japanese engineer named Ito launched a top-secret project called Kugo immediately after the Teleforce article appeared, attempting to create a directed beam capable of disabling the engines of American bombers. Nazi Germany also had at least two of their own ray weapon projects during the war. Officially, everyone laughed at the old man, but behind closed doors they rushed to copy his idea. The chilling detail surfaced in 1984 when the original schematics for Teleforce were found in the archives of the Nikola Tesla Museum in Belgrade. In 2015, an Australian professor named Adrian Cheek assembled a team at the University of Adelaide. They spent nearly a decade working from Tesla's original blueprints and successfully built a functioning prototype of a directed beam weapon. The concept wasn't just a fantasy, it was entirely achievable with modern technology. If Teleforce was pure science fiction, why did three superpowers lose sleep over the inventor's schematics? The third mystery takes us 6,000 feet above sea level. In the spring of 1899, Tesla left suffocating New York City for the small town of Colorado Springs. The scientist was drawn to the thin mountain air and absolute quiet. There, he built a wooden laboratory with a retractable roof to keep the structure from burning down during his experiments. Inside this barn, the scientist assembled the largest Tesla coil in history, measuring nearly 15 meters in diameter and producing up to 12 million volts. Picture the scene. Dead of night in the mountains, the roof rolled back and artificial lightning bolts stretching over 40 meters, as long as a 10-story building, cracking into the night sky from the coil's dome. The thunder from these discharges could be heard 15 miles away. In nearby Colorado Springs, the power plant burned out completely several times because of his experiments. The local El Paso Electric Company initially gave the inventor free electricity out of respect, but after the third destroyed generator, the relationship soured quickly. Horses in their stables bolted from shocks conducted through their iron horseshoes, and butterflies in the area fluttered through the air as if intoxicated. The inventor himself walked around wearing rubber-soled shoes and kept his ears stuffed with cotton. Tesla's assistant once saw a column of light rise from the coil straight into the sky, looking like a fiery tornado. But Tesla's most shocking feat occurred during a public demonstration. He illuminated 200 light bulbs of 50 watts each without a single wire at a distance of 26 miles from his coil, simply by plugging them straight into the ground near a stream. This is a documented historical fact, not a tabloid legend. Any modern engineer will tell you that replicating this today is practically impossible. Tesla left Colorado Springs on January 7, 1900, leaving behind massive unpaid electricity bills. The date of his departure is noted by all of the scientist's biographers. Exactly 43 years later to the day, Tesla died in his New Yorker hotel room. Some historians see this as a mere coincidence, while others spot a strange symbolic loop connecting Colorado and the hotel in a fatal circle. 4 years later, the lab was demolished and the equipment was auctioned off for pennies. We still don't know the peak power levels he truly achieved in those mountains. Some biographers believe it was there that the concepts of Teleforce and Wardenclyffe were born. The fourth mystery is born out of the silence of those mountain nights. One July evening in 1899, Tesla sat entirely alone in his laboratory. He was tracking lightning discharges using his ultra-sensitive receiver when suddenly a bizarre sound echoed in his headphones. It wasn't static, the crackle of lightning or interference from a standard radio station. They were rhythmic pulses that sounded like a simple count. 1, 2, 3. A pause, and then 1, 2, 3 again. Tesla later described the sensation as if he were witnessing the birth of new knowledge, as though the universe itself was speaking to mankind in an understandable language for the very first time. The inventor checked every possible terrestrial source and ruled them out one by one. The sun didn't produce signals like that, the moon couldn't generate them, and Venus was out of question. The scientist then made a bold announcement that cost him his reputation for years to come. He declared that he had received signals from another planet, possibly Mars or Venus. In December of that year, Tesla wrote a letter to reporter Julian Hawthorne about his discovery, and on February 9, 1901, Collier's Weekly published his detailed article titled "Talking with the Planets." Academic scientists of the time openly mocked Tesla in print. But this is where the story gets fascinating. In 1996, a group of scientists replicated Tesla's experiment using his exact frequencies, and they did catch cosmic signals identical to what the inventor described. However, the source wasn't Mars, it was the radio emissions generated by the interaction between Jupiter's moon Io and its magnetic field. Tesla had effectively become the first human in history to record cosmic radio signals, long before Carl Jansky, who is officially credited with discovering radio astronomy in 1932. Tesla had beaten the recognized pioneer of radio astronomy by at least 33 years. Yet there is an uncomfortable detail in this story that textbooks rarely mention. Tesla kept a meticulous diary of his Colorado experiments almost every single day, and there isn't a single entry about signals from space in July 1899. The inventor first mentioned the signals only in a letter dated December 8th of that year. Either the genius's memory failed him by 6 months, or he intentionally kept quiet all that time. The fifth mystery is the most chilling because of its terrifyingly accurate glimpse into the future. In 1926, Collier's magazine published an interview with Tesla by journalist John B. Kennedy. In this conversation, the 70-year-old inventor predicted things that make your hair stand on end. He claimed that a person would be able to see and hear another individual on a different continent as if they were face to face. He said every person would carry a device in their vest pocket through which they could communicate with anyone. This device would transmit images, music, and voices simultaneously. This was a time when television was still being invented in its earliest laboratories, and the internet didn't exist even in the wildest dreams of science fiction writers. Smartphones were roughly 80 years away, and video calls like Skype wouldn't appear for nearly a century. Yet Tesla described these devices with frightening accuracy, right down to their pocket-sized dimensions. Even earlier, in 1898, the inventor publicly demonstrated something unbelievable at an electrical exhibition in Madison Square Garden. He launched a radio-controlled boat. It was the world's very first remote-controlled model using radio waves. The crowd thought they were watching sorcery, or that the boat was moving via hidden wires. Some even shouted that a trained dwarf was hidden inside the vessel. In reality, Tesla had laid the foundation for all modern robotics and unmanned systems. In his 1926 interview, the inventor spoke of machines that could fly without a human on board. Modern drones, just described in different words. Tesla predicted the mass emancipation of women and the rise of artificial intelligence. In a 1900 article for Century magazine, the inventor described solar panels and wind turbines, calling them the superior energy sources of the future, long before the world ever worried about oil dependency. How did an old man living in a hotel room with pigeons know all this with such precision? Either Tesla possessed a superhuman intuition and could extrapolate trends a century into the future, or he had already mapped out these devices in his mind without showing the blueprints to anyone. If Tesla had already engineered these things in his head, where are those projects now? This brings us smoothly to the sixth mystery, the one that is truly unsettling. On January 7, 1943, Tesla died alone in his room. The New York Medical Examiner recorded the cause of death as coronary thrombosis. All that remained in the room were pigeon feathers, feeders on the windowsill, and 80 trunks filled with papers. What followed sounds like a scripted spy movie. By the morning of January 8th, agents of the Bureau of Investigation stormed the room, arriving long before the inventor's own nephew. The operation was directed by the head of the Bureau himself, the infamous J. Edgar Hoover. He declared Tesla's documents top secret despite the scientist's citizenship. The official seizure was carried out by the Office of Alien Property Custodian. All 80 trunks were carted off in trucks to a secret government warehouse. To evaluate the papers, they called in an engineer from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology named John G. Trump. Yes, that was the biological uncle of the future president, Donald Trump, a strange historical quirk in the middle of a wartime spy operation. John Trump studied the papers and wrote a report stating that they contained nothing of military value, claiming they were merely the philosophical musings of an old man, promotional texts, and lacked any workable schematics. Yet several anomalies stand out that don't fit this simple narrative. If there was nothing of value, why were the documents classified for 40 years? Certain members of the U.S. military held a completely different opinion. Brigadier General L.C. Craig, the first military pilot of a jet aircraft in the U.S. history, openly stated that there was a rational kernel in Tesla's ideas and that the inventor's particle beam weapon was entirely feasible. In 1952, a court finally awarded the estate to Tesla's nephew, Sava Kosanovic, a Yugoslavian official. He received his uncle's papers through a legal ruling, and the trunks were shipped to Belgrade, where Nikola Tesla Museum stands today. But here lies the most mysterious twist of the entire saga. The government warehouse originally received 80 trunks of papers and equipment, but only 60 containers arrived in Belgrade. Where the 20 missing crates went, no one knows for sure. Tesla's biographer, Mark Cypher, openly writes about this disappearance in his books. In the 1980s, President Ronald Reagan launched the Strategic Defense Initiative, known to the world as the Star Wars program. It was based on the concept of beam weapons capable of shooting down enemy missiles mid-flight. Essentially, it was the exact same Teleforce concept, just under a new name and modern execution. A portion of the inventor's papers was only declassified in 2016, 73 years after his death. Perhaps the 20 missing trunks simply rotted away from moisture and time in some warehouse. Perhaps they lie in a hidden vault at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. Or perhaps a portion of Tesla's technology is already operational in classified weapons that we won't find out about until another 50 years when the next batch of archives are open to the public. Nikola Tesla died broke, without a family, without heirs, and without official recognition. His contemporaries called him a mad old man who talked to birds in a hotel room and considered one of them his bride. Yet more than 80 years after his death, his name is carried by the most valuable electric car company in the world. His alternating current flows through wires in every home on Earth, from small villages in Siberia to the skyscrapers of Tokyo. His concepts of wireless communication sit in the pocket of every schoolchild in the form of a smartphone. His eerie predictions from the 1920s came true almost down to the last comma. Perhaps that is precisely why his papers were so heavily guarded, because the mind of a single Serbian man held more of the future than all the world's universities. And if 20 trunks out of 80 are still missing, it means a piece of our tomorrow is out there somewhere, and someone is already reading those notebooks long before the rest of us.